The EU is inefficient, undemocratic and broken in many other ways. These are claims made daily by politicians, journalists and populists around the EU. While they often exaggerate or misrepresent reality for their own personal gains, there is a core of truth to it. There are plenty of things wrong with the EU. These faults stand in the way of it being effective and strong. But unlike what these populists say, the solution is not to demolish it all. The solution is a true European democracy. To face the challenges of our age, we need an EU that is strong and effective. To get there, we need to fix it. But how do we do that? We teamed up with Reinier van Lanschot, candidate for the European elections for a political party seeking to reform the EU, to discuss which big steps are needed to create a truly European democracy. Welcome to Ciceroni. In this two-part video, we will run through the main changes needed to fix the European Union, according to Reinier van Lanschot. So, over to you, Reinier.
In this first video on how to create a true European democracy, we will discuss the European Parliament, its elections and its parties. Starting with European political parties. A European democracy cannot exist without European political parties. But the European Parliament is filled almost exclusively with politicians representing national parties at the moment. Per definition, these parties look at policies through a national lens and with national interests in mind. To get elected, they only need their national constituency. In the European Parliament, we accept this as a normality, but it really is rather weird. Imagine your national parliament was exclusively filled with parties that represent regional or local interests. In that case, these parties will each try to get the best for their own region and look at each problem only through that regional lens, without looking at the bigger picture or the entire country as a whole. To have a true European democracy, we need real European parties. Parties whose members from all over Europe create policies together that have an influence on the entire continent. Parties that you can vote for regardless of your nationality, with the same program all over Europe, just like most of us are used to in national politics. This will bring European politics closer to the people. It will feel less distant because it is less distant. While most parties in the European Parliament are national, there are some exceptions to the rule. The parties DiEM25, the Pirate Party and Volt are trying to break the norm and bring politics to a European level. With such new parties emerging, there is a positive trend that might bring forward more European parties and might force existing national parties to work together more with their international counterparts. Number 2. Real European elections. With European parties, we solve some of the current problems in the EU, but more is needed when it comes to us voting for our representation. What we need is real European elections. Currently, the rules and procedures differ greatly per country. Voting ages, for example, with some countries already allowing 16 or 17-year-olds to vote, while others don't. Again, translated to a national context, this would be absurd. Imagine you cannot vote by post for your national elections, but a friend living in a city nearby can? Or you can vote as a 17-year-old, while for the same elections your friend can't. A similar strange aspect of the European elections is that you cannot vote for the same people as people in other countries. So you can't vote for the vast majority of people and parties running for the same parliament because they are from other countries. In fact, you probably have never heard of these parties, let alone their politicians or their political programs. Again, imagine this would be the case in your national elections. Wouldn't it be strange that you can't vote for 95% of the parties that are running? Or that you have no clue of the political positions of 95% of the people in your parliament? So, in order to make democracy in the EU truly European, we need to reform the electoral law. We need to unify rules so everyone has the same access to vote, including the voting age. And we need transnational lists so we can all vote for the same people and the same parties. But with this comes another challenge. How do we ensure that all regions of Europe are fairly represented in Parliament? Many countries don't have a good system for this, so their parliaments might be filled with people from a few regions, while many others are underrepresented. Without such a system, in Europe-wide elections, you might end up with many unrepresented regions. The good news is that there are existing examples of good voting systems to solve this. The Germans, with their love for complex processes, use one for their national elections. In short, half of the seats in the national parliament are filled with representatives from constituencies, and half of the seats are chosen by nationwide percentage. A similar system, with some tweaks, could be used for European elections to ensure a representative and true European democracy. Number 3. European Parliament. Now that we have fixed how we choose our European parliamentarians, the next step is to improve the parliament itself. Here we need both institutional and cultural changes. The most important institutional change needed is to give the European Parliament the right of initiative, the ability to propose new laws themselves. Currently, the Commission has a monopoly on proposing bills. In other words, our elected representatives can't propose laws, but need to wait for unelected officials to do so. If this seems strange to you, you are not alone. The issue is often used to show the EU is not truly democratic. And because all national parliaments can propose new laws, this seems like a simple and logical thing to change. So let's do it! Apart from this institutional change, there are important cultural changes that need to be made. You probably remember one or multiple stories of MEPs misusing funds, taking dirty money from abroad, or other fraudulent and unethical practices. Apart from just being morally wrong, this behavior has a much broader effect than just on the person who does it. It is detrimental to our trust in these institutions and damaging for the inner workings of our parliament. If all MEPs would finally agree to it themselves, we could fix this with stricter rules on transparency and accountability. Like disclosure of office costs and expenses, registration of lobbying activities, and the publication of how each MEP votes. And by introducing an independent watchdog to check and, if necessary, prosecute misconduct. In both the categories of institutional and cultural changes, we have the infamous and ridiculous move between Strasbourg and Brussels. In this expensive, wasteful, and inefficient circus, all MEPs and their staff travel hundreds of kilometers to work in another building for a few days each month. A building that is empty for the rest of the month. Nobody thinks that is a good idea. Well, except for maybe the French.
As you can see, major changes are needed to make the EU a true European parliamentary democracy. This requires cultural changes in how we view politics to shift it from national to European level. European political parties are an important step for this. And it requires fundamental changes to our treaties and institutions. The full empowerment of the European Parliament is one of them. But the other institutions need reform as well. In our next video, we will discuss more institutional changes like how to reform the Commission and the European Council, as well as the cultural ones like the introduction of a common European broadcaster. To make all these changes is not a small task, but it's worthwhile, because it'll enable us to effectively solve challenges like climate change and respond adequately to crises like pandemics or war. And as an added bonus, it'll enhance the well-being of all Europeans. Let us know what you think. Are these the reforms needed to fix the EU? If not, what model do you propose? Or are there other things you think are more urgent? Let us know in the comments.